The Sandy and Toddcast is a Mindgarden Media podcast in association with
Screw You, Todd
Productions. Another week, another episode of the Sandy and Toddcast.
Here we are, episode 2, and this week it's all about the aliens.
We promise, because last week was supposed to be about aliens, and we talked too much and we never got to it. But we do promise this week to actually get to it. We got a lot planned for you. It is Season 9, Episode 2, Close Encounters of the Weirdo Kind, and it's next on the Sandy and Toddcast.
Hey guys, it's me, Sandy.
And this is Dave, better known as #Poor Dave.
We don't always call you that. Anyway, in case you didn't know, Dave and I are part of a great new show called Empire Spirits.
It's where we hunt lots of ghosts in some of the most well-known bars and restaurants in central New York, along with a great cast
Of characters.
Yep, Bill Vinci, Michelle Classic, Ryan Vinci, Lafayette Cunningham, and Heather Elias.
You'll be able to see each episode starting this fall on Facebook and YouTube.
Just like our Facebook page, Empire Spirits CNY, to keep up to date on the latest.
But we can't leave you without thanking our sponsors because, well, without them, it just wouldn't be happening.
So a big thanks to the Stife on Varick Street in Utica, Bill Vinci and the Empire Plate, Utica Coffee Roasting Company, and the Sandy and Toddcast.
We'd also like to thank Northeastern Roofing and Construction, northeasternroofs.com, Labella Flowers, that's labellaflowers.com, and Independent Artistry by Dawn Marie, Independent Artistry by DMF.com.
And we can't forget licensed real estate person Paul F. Sacco, 315-525-1377 with Howard Hanna Real Estate Services, or Joshua A. Amodio with Priceless Inspections, Central New York's top choice home inspector since 2012, 315-525-8725.
Now, back to the show.
Broadcasting from two very different yet magical places not found on any map. Get ready to discuss the strange, weird, ghostly, crazy, spooky, and odd things that take place around us each and every day, all while having a little bit of fun. This is the Sandy and Toddcast. Welcome to this week's edition of the Sandy and Toddcast. She is Sandy.
He is Todd.
And this week we promised to talk about aliens.
Yeah, and this was a listener request.
Yep.
A listener request to talk about aliens, which I will talk about aliens all day because I think it's very interesting, Todd. And it's something that as the years have gone by, little by little, slowly as we turn, we're getting more and more confirmation from the government, too, that they're aware of things that are going on. And it's stuff that we had no idea they were aware of until recently. So,
yeah, in fact, UFO sightings are up right now. Pentagon got involved, all that kind of stuff earlier this year and late last year. They were coming forward with information. And I mean, the thing about aliens for me is that I'll just put it out there. I've never really had a lot of experience where I thought there were, aliens and stuff like that. But I do think that they are real. I think that a lot of things that have happened in the history of this country that, like Roswell, New Mexico and all that kind of stuff, probably something happened there and it was covered up for whatever reason. And I think that we're finally getting to a point where we're going to learn more and more about it. Technology has come further. People with their cell phones, their smartphones are getting video of things that surveillance cameras, all that kind of stuff. We're seeing stuff that we were never able to catch before. And I think it's doing two things, though. I think, number one, we're becoming more educated about things. But number two, it's opening the door to a lot of bullshit as well.
It sure is. And, that you made a really good point about cover-ups. I think the government, there's been a lot of chatter about the government over the years with UFOs and cover-ups and basically thinking that the government thinks that we're all stupid, and they're trying to protect us from ourselves by keeping this knowledge that they have from us. And I think there's some truth in that. I think we're at a point now where they can't really do that as well anymore. We're not stupid, and we do know. And this many people having experiences, I had my own experience. This many people having experiences and actually seeing these cover-ups in action, per se, I just don't think that they can do it the same way that they used to do it. I think they're starting to get backed up against the wall a bit.
Think about this. It's just under 100 years ago, but on October 30th of 1938, a very infamous radio broadcast of something called War of the Worlds took place on radio. And if you don't know this story, it's incredible. Yeah. Because basically Orson Welles does a radio broadcast in 1938. It's about it's a radio play, and it's about the world being invaded by aliens. And we would sit here in the year 2023 and go, oh, foolish, it's just radio, and blah, blah, blah. People were like jumping out of windows and ending their lives and stuff like that over a radio play, okay? Yeah. So, yeah, I think that there was a point where the government probably had to be a little careful about stuff, because if a radio play can turn things upside down, who knows? Now, of course, times have changed. I think the thing that's very important here is that information from the scientific realm of the world has trickled its way down to the average common person. It's easier to find out scientific information now than it ever was before. And they've made leaps and bounds in so many areas of science that now, we've got telescopes that can see further. We've got all this stuff that they can gather information from. And I think so now we have a more informed bit of information that can be filtered down to the average Joe. But it's interesting because when you take technical information and you do filter it down to average people who don't necessarily understand that particular thing, it's very easy for that information to be skewed. So if the information is not coming from a reliable source, it could be mayhem with a certain group of people. So I think we do have to be very careful of that. I would like to see, I would like to not see anything to do with aliens because, like, for right now, I think the 2020s are about as fucking crazy as you could get. Yeah. We don't necessarily need to have, information about aliens right now. I don't necessarily need that. I'm the average person who works Monday through Friday, works for the weekend, and can't wait to open a bottle of beer on a Friday after work. Okay, that's my life. And I don't know if I want to have to worry about beings with tentacles and stuff like that. So that concerns me a little bit. But I mean, I think, we are at a point where we do have to answer some of these questions. I've not had experience. You have. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Mm-hmm. I will say this. Grant Wilson, who was part of the original Ghost Hunters team. Yeah. He and Jason, can't think of his last name. Hawes wrote a book early on in their Ghost Hunters series. And it was about some of the things that happened to them that made them realize something else was out there. And Grant barely talked about an experience he had with what I believe were aliens and a UFO. And that kind of opened his mind up to what else is out there. So I think that people do have experiences. And I think a lot like with spirits and energy and that side of paranormal, I think that if you're more open to it, you may have more experience than if you close yourself off to it.
I agree.
Also, could there be some sort of intertwining between that energy side and the alien side? Absolutely.
It's a great question. And, just a quick aside on the War of the Worlds. I remember when I was in college, So you're talking, I think this was either first or second year, so it would have been 1989.
72. I was in college in 1972. Women weren't allowed to wear pants back then. We wore pantaloons.
I would have been very upset if that were the case. It was probably 89, 90, and I was taking some radio classes, and I took a history of radio class, and our professor, Greg McShay, who was a wonderful, wonderful professor. Actually, who would have thought that, 30 some years later, I would be going around in those radio circles with veterans like a Greg McShay. But anyways, he played War of the Worlds for us. Now you're talking 89, 90, and my class literally, even knowing the history of it and knowing that it wasn't real, we all just kind of had this look on our face. It was so well done.
Yep.
That we had such a look on our face of like, this is really scary. This is really scary. And now imagine all those years earlier with people who had no idea what was going on. I mean, pure genius, but created so much chaos. So I get the idea that all of those decades ago, the government was right to kind of protect us from ourselves.
Yeah.
But I do feel that we're much more enlightened today. We have much more knowledge and scientific prowess today than we did all those years ago. And I think that with the inception of Project Blue Book and things like that, which nowadays is quite outdated, I do think it's time. I think it's time because I feel like, and I do believe that there is, I think we would be incredibly naive and stupid, Todd, to think that in all of these universes out there, that we would be the only ones at this level,
well, of course,
to exist. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Honestly, the truth of it is, we're probably the stupidest group out there.
We're probably, we're probably on par with ladybugs to them.
Right.
Yep. I mean, come on. And I do think that if there was someone or something out there that was going to harm us, I sure as hell think that they probably would have done it by now. I mean, harm us as a whole, as a planet, as a world, as the world. I think that they would have done it by now. Do I think that they're all very peaceful? Probably not.
Just like people on Earth, not all are peaceful. Not all countries are peaceful.
Not at all. Not at all. But I don't think that there's too much at this point that would surprise me that's out there. And I think it's time. I think it's coming. I think we are getting kind of too smart for our own good in a lot of ways. I do think it's coming. We're going to figure this out with or without the government. And I think that they know this. And I think that that's why they're starting to, even though there are some redacted things in these files, they're still starting to ease us into the understanding that this is going to be happening. I mean, I had an experience. It didn't really mean much to me at the time because I literally was 16 years old and very stupid. 16-year-old kids in the 80s are not the same as 16-year-old kids today. And I was pretty dumb. And I didn't know a lot, and I didn't know much about aliens or UFOs back then. And so I was just trying to get all the paranormal, in search of stuff I could, but, a little smattering here and there. And I'll never forget, Todd, it was in the middle of summer. I was about 16. So that would have made it about 88, I think. 86, 87, 88. And it was really hot. And my bedroom window, my bed was under my bedroom window, and my bedroom window faced like this little dirt road. And then there was a rising hill, large hill across the street from me, just a field. And it was so hot and I couldn't sleep. So my window was open and I got up We didn't have air conditioners back then.
My day, we didn't have air conditioners and women didn't wear pants.
That's right. And so I got up and I got on my knees on the bed and I put my elbows on the window and I was just looking out. And all of a sudden, behind the hill, this light came up over the hill. And we're talking, I lived in the country, so we lived in farm country. There wasn't anything really that was going to be coming up from behind a hill that I was aware of. And my first thought was it was a helicopter, but there was no sound. It was silent. And all of a sudden, when it got to a certain height, it split into three. And one stayed in the middle, one went to one side, one went to the other. It raised up, all three of them raised up, and eventually the two on the outside came back together with the one in the middle, and then they just lowered back down behind the hill again.
Ew.
Yeah. And here am I. I'm just like, oh, that's weird. And then I went to sleep. Didn't really think much of it. So it wasn't until many years later, after I sort of started to kind of become involved in the paranormal and mature a little bit, where I had this thirst for knowledge of different things. And it wasn't just about, what music I was going to listen to at that particular point in time or what boy I liked. And it kind of dawned on me that I saw something that I can't explain. And so that sort of made me, think about it more, I would say, in the past 10, 15 years. And one thing that's really interesting about my sighting is that a handful of years ago, I actually did a search and I found like a UFO reporting, like discussion board type thing. And I found someone who had lived in the same area, same general area as I did all those years ago, who it was within like a year or two of my experience, had an experience themselves. It was in the summer again, and it was a warm night, and they were in their pool. They were probably teenagers, young adults. They were in the pool and they saw the same thing happen. The same light came up over the trees, split into three, went back together, and descended back behind the trees again. And so that kind of validated my experience for me, as somebody else had something very similar. I couldn't believe I was reading that somebody had something very similar to mine within a couple year time frame. And then, to make it even crazier, there was a crop circle that formed within about a 10-minute drive, maybe even a little less, of where I had lived when I had my experience. And that was about 5 years after my experience. So my experience was in the summer of 1987. 5 or 6 years, I'm sorry. And in Mohawk, New York, there was a crop circle that was found on, I believe it was on Route 28. And that was, for those of you who are local, that's going from Mohawk up into Richfield Springs. And so it was on Route 28 south. And it happened on June 21st, again in the summer, which I thought was interesting, in an oat field. And that was in 1993. And I went to the Independent Crop Circles Research Association website because you can't really find... Because there is one. Yeah. I had to Google that, too, because I had no idea. I just kind of Googled Mohawk, New York crop circle. And they actually had a report on it and some pictures, which I'm going to put up in our group and on our page after this airs, and so that everybody can see the report and see the our Facebook group and our Facebook page can see the report itself. But I'm just going to read it because it was so interesting. And I never got to see the crop circle myself because I wasn't really living in the area at the time. I just knew that it had happened, but it was in a lot of newspapers. And come to find out, there were several crop circles found in New York State over the years, which no clue. This was the closest one to me, though, which again was only about 10 minutes drive from where I had lived a handful of years before when I had my experience. It says 4 circles were found linked by pathways appearing on a steep hill. The circle diameters were 20 and a half feet, 40 feet, 45 feet, 43 and a half feet, and 88 feet. All the circles were slightly elliptical in the north-south direction. 3 of the circles were swirled clockwise, with 1 circle counterclockwise. 2 of the pathways were found to extend about halfway to the centers of 2 of the circles, while the rest of the pathway ends terminated at the meeting point with the circles. Areas of randomly downed crop also in the field. Expulsion cavities and lateral node splitting was found. That's in the seeds, in the oat seeds that grow. The Syracuse Herald-Journal on 8/2/1993 reports that a passing truck driver claims he witnessed several objects hovering in the air above the field just before the formation was discovered, and that thunderstorms were reported in the area around the time of discovery. W.C. Levengood analyzed samples taken from the formation and found significant node bending as compared to the controls. Expulsion cavities, growth suppression in germination studies, and reduced electrical conductivity in the tissue surrounding the seeds. New York State Police, this is very interesting. New York State Police turned up no evidence to suggest a hoax. So that's the report that was in the Independent Crop Circles Research Association website. And to make this even more interesting, I looked on their website to see some of the other crop circle reports that they had in New York. And some of them did, in fact, talk about thunderstorms, winds, severe winds, objects. So very, very interesting. I did find, believe it or not, and I am going to put the link for this in the show notes and also in the group on Facebook, in the page on Facebook, I actually found a video of the crop circle. This was like amazing to me because this was 1993. And who would have thought there'd actually be a video of it floating around on the internet, 1993, but 2 looks like teenage guys took their handheld camera down in the car. They were listening to some great 80s music, 90s music, and took some video of the crop circle. And you can see scientists and researchers and reporters down there, huge long lines of cars. I know exactly where this is. And at the end, the best part is as they walk back to their car, you can see all the great 70s and 80s cars.
That would be my favorite part of the video.
That was great. But just fascinating to me because this kind of really validated. I thought it was just interesting that in that time span of 5 or 6 years, you've got me having a weird experience, you've got somebody else having a weird experience, and then you've got a crop circle showing up in that area. So really, really fascinating. I still to this day don't know what to make of it. I do know that I believe that aliens exist. I don't know what in the world they'd be doing in little podunk farm town, USA, but they obviously had some kind of business going on there. And
But they don't necessarily. I mean, here's the thing. A couple of notes. Number one, we don't have as many sightings of crop circles in the news like we used to. I think in the late 70s and 80s, they were just everywhere. They were just crop circles everywhere. And you just don't hear that anymore. And then secondly, of course, it's going to be small town. I mean, I just don't think aliens flying above a metro community like New York or Chicago, they wouldn't be able to fly as much under the radar. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And you know what is interesting about that is when I was looking on the list, there were several in New York City, but I just feel like those are the ones who are most likely to be hoaxes or misidentification.
Sure. And listen, there's video out there that is pretty it proves that there's something out there.
Compelling.
And then there's the video out there is like, well, come on. The best video, I've actually found some video and some audio that I think is proof that aliens do exist. And this came out, I'm going to say, early 70s. Mm-hmm. Check this out, okay?
Yeah, but I wish you'd stand still.
All right, that was the Brady Bunch. I don't know if you remember the episode.
Where they were blowing through the whistle?
So Greg is up in the attic.
And they're shining the flashlight.
He's got a flashlight and he's blowing the whistle.
As soon as I heard that, it's like, oh my God, he's playing the Brady Bunch.
Do you remember the episode? Awesome. Do you remember the episode where there was a bust of Alice or a bust of Mr. Brady or something, and then they pretended that the house was haunted, and yes. Alice ended up busting.
The cellophane looking ghost that was coming through oh my God, I watch Brady Bunch all the time. I remember those. But I think just to get back to the crop circles, I think it's interesting what happened. I just was watching something briefly about it. Not that long ago, that after the first round of crop circles came out, then there was these two guys who claimed that they were the ones doing it all. And
that always happens though, doesn't it?
Yes, and they did prove that they had done some of them, but they also found that there were some that would have been impossible for a human to do. Impossible for a human to do. And that they weren't even in the right place at the right time. And so is it possible that copycatters have done it over the years? Sure it is. But you're talking about the New York State Police not covering it up, actually saying, we don't find any evidence of a hoax here.
Here's the thing with anything like this, and it goes to ghosts, and it goes to mediums and psychics, and it goes to all that stuff. There's always a group of people that will fuck with it, so it makes all the evidence that you may or may not actually have seem unimportant.
Yeah.
And, you talk about in the day, the people that would do seances and stuff and fake it just to get money. There was that. And then you've got people who fake paranormal shows and all that kind of stuff. And so it leaves you going, well, if this is fake, how do I know that that's true? And I hate that point of it.
I know.
And part of that has really played into social media now. Mm-hmm. Because everybody has an Instagram account or a Facebook account or a TikTok account. And basically, those people who push false narratives fuck it up for everything else.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's important that with anything, whether it's the topic of aliens or the paranormal world, mediums, any of it, the first thing we need to do is look at the big picture of it. And we have to decide whether there's a possibility. Because you're always going to have people who don't believe in anything, no matter what. It doesn't matter what you say or do.
Sure.
They don't believe in any of that stuff. They just want to, go home, eat dinner,
have a beer on a Friday. Yep, exactly.
Have a beer, and then there are the people who not necessarily fall hook, line, and sinker for everything, but are open to the possibility. And there's all different kinds of people. But I think, first of all, you have to look at that idea. Despite my experience, a lot of my life, I thought that there was no such thing as aliens because I didn't know enough about it.
But also we were taught that there's no such thing as aliens. There's no such things as ghosts. I mean, we were just taught that.
People who see or experience these things are crazy or imagining or hallucinating things. And you know,
I just love that.
Everybody needs to go on YouTube and find that episode because it's freaking hilarious. But, you know, I mean, you have to educate yourself and you have to form an intelligent opinion. You can't just blindly believe everything. You have to be able to decide for yourself, no matter what it is in life. You have to be able to make your own decisions. And I'm at a point now where I do believe that there is something. I believe I experienced something. Do I 100%, unless they got out of their craft and walked across the street and, you know, blew a fan on my face because it was so hot. I can't tell you that it was without a doubt aliens. But I can tell you that what I experienced was weird. Yeah. That somebody else experienced it. And then a crop circle shows up all within the span of 6 years. That's pretty odd to me. Yeah. It makes me question things. I don't blindly believe one way or the other, but it definitely makes me question things. And honestly, I want to know what's going on. I want to know what's going on. Does that mean I sit there and watch every single documentary about it? No, because I get bored easily with that stuff. But I do want to know what's going on. I have this thirst for knowledge, for the truth. Well, are we? Do you think we got our aliens out of us today, or do we need to do another episode next week? Well, I think that maybe we should talk about a couple of things next week that I thought were really interesting and have sort of added some conspiracy theories to the mix about aliens, paranormal, what's going on, what's out there. Are we ascending to another dimension? All that kind of cool stuff. So maybe next week, let's continue our discussion and kind of talk about that a little bit. All right. That sounds good. We do have to get our card for the week to find out what's going on for the week ahead. And Lorna, of course, from the UK, helps us out with that again this week.
Hi, it's Lorna. This week's card for the week ahead comes from the Cosmic Cat Wisdom Cards. And the message is focus. Keep your eyes on the prize. This is a reminder to us all that it's key to believe in any situations you wish to manifest in order to achieve the desired outcome. Stay focused. Stay grateful. Don't let your confidence, beliefs, or true desire be knocked by anyone or anything that can bring in those little gremlins of doubt. It's natural to have a wobble or the odd second thoughts, but if it's truly what you desire, then you'll probably recognise the feeling or the pull that comes when you can imagine that dream coming true. Remind yourself of this feeling and use it to do the focus or the refocus that you might need. That prize can be yours with the right practice. Have a great week.
So when she's just said that prize can be yours, I was going to say, if the price is right.
That's right. If the price is right. I love her.
And this car can be yours if the price is right.
It's nothing like good old Bob Barker. I miss those days.
I know. It's just not the same anymore.
I used to watch, my grandmother used to work, I don't know, what did they call the swing shift? 3 to 11 was it? Was 3 p.m. to 11 p.m.
2 to 10 or 3 to 11, depending on where you're at. Yeah.
She used to work that shift in like a factory when I was little. And so she'd go in at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we'd always watch every day. We'd watch The Price is Right. So I grew up with The Price is Right. It was on 11 o'clock every day. And then we'd watch Days of Our Lives and Another World. But there's nothing like the old Price is Right. Takes me back.
Absolutely. Well, let's get to our spiel for the week.
You can find the Sandy and Toddcast on any of the platforms that you normally find your podcasts, including YouTube and Twitter. Be sure to like the Sandy and Toddcast on Facebook to keep up on the latest goings-on, including each week's episode. You can also join our group, Stay Weirdos Friends of the Sandy and Toddcast, for more fun. Stay Weirdos is a safe place to share your thoughts, feelings, ideas, and random inappropriate memes without judgment. Sandy and Todd also have a podcast called the Empathecary Podcast. It's for empaths, by empaths. And if you know an empath, you might want to listen too. Find and like the page on Facebook. And finally, if you're thinking about starting your own podcast and just aren't sure where to start, Sandy and Todd can also help with that too. Mindgarden Media is their latest project where the dynamic duo can guide you every step of the way in your podcasting journey. Editing, producing, and consulting is what they do. Like Mindgarden Media on Facebook or email them at themindgardenmedia@gmail.com. And as always, thanks for staying weird.
So we're going to kind of just continue this discussion on the next episode of the Sandy and Toddcast a little bit.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. I want to talk a little bit about Skinwalker Ranch.
Ooh.
Yeah, and then there's something else that I kind of discovered recently, and it was because of a really weird event that happened in June called the Schumann Resonances.
Yeah.
And so and I had no idea what this was, and I found out a lot about it. We're going to talk a little bit about that and see what kind of ideas we can come up with that next week.
Sounds good. So until the next episode, have a great week. Bye.